All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, All Star guard James Harden got his wish as he was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers today. Along with Paul Millsap, Harden will be headed to Philadelphia, while the Nets will receive a pair of first round picks, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, and Ben Simmons. Now, this deal makes headlines, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, all Brooklyn and Philadelphia did was to exchange their headaches. James Harden didn't want to play with Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons no longer wanted to be in Philadelphia. And, for James Harden, it's the story of his NBA career. When the going got tough, he got going. And in this case, he hopped himself an Amtrak and went down to Philly. Now, all you heard from Sixers general manager Daryl Morey was that the team wanted to get the most value for Simmons via a trade. But in my opinion, they gave up too much for Harden. I liked, you heard the rumors about a potential trade with the Sacramento Kings. And I think, what they would have gotten back from Sacramento and what they would not have had to give up in this scenario with the Brooklyn Nets would have been better for the Philadelphia 76ers, because now you have to ask yourself, how is James Harden going to play alongside Joel Embiid? And this is Joel Embiid's team. Now, you look at it for James Harden's career. Go back to his time with the Oklahoma City Thunder. This guy was non-existent in the NBA Finals when the Thunder lost to the Miami Heat. After that, he got traded to the Houston Rockets. They had some great teams. He put up some great regular season numbers, but when the going got tough in the postseason, more often than not, James Harden did not come through. You go back to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semis last year between the Nets and the Bucks, and Kevin Durant was out there playing 1-on-5. James Harden was out there, and honestly, James Harden was just getting his cardio in. I know there was like the talks about his hamstring being hurt, but nonetheless, once again, he was a non-factor. James Harden shut it down leading up to this trade. The Nets have been in a tailspin ever since the Kevin Durant injury. And now, James Harden just tucked tail and got out of New York City. Now, on the flip side, for for James Harden, on top of that, you know, this is another, bad mark on his career, because this guy has now talked his way off of two teams in less than 2 years, and actually in about a year and a half. And you look at it, I mean, if you're James Harden, what more can you do from the standpoint of, you look at the talent that was placed around James Harden with the Houston Rockets, and he didn't come through. He played alongside the likes of Dwight Howard, Kyle Lowry. At one point, I could be wrong about Kyle Lowry. I'm sorry. Chris Paul, definitely. PJ Tucker. One point you had Kevin McHale as your coach. Then for the most part it was Mike D'Antoni. What more can a team give you? And then you go to the Nets. You're playing with KD and you're playing with Kyrie. Although that quote unquote big three really did not play with each other that often, but nonetheless, to me, I think this is a bad look for James Harden. Um, my thing is this. I've talked about James Harden lacking the clutch gene, but my biggest thing is this: if James Harden couldn't handle things in Brooklyn, what makes him think that things are going to get any better in the city of Philadelphia? Yes, New York City is the biggest media market in the country, but Philadelphia is a very tough sports town, and they are very tough and very critical of their star players. And when you're a star player in the city of Philadelphia, and if you don't get it done in those clutch moments, they are going to let you know about it. So James Harden's going to the Sixers. The Sixers should be a playoff team, but guess what? If the Sixers cannot get it done at some point in the postseason, I guarantee you James Harden will immediately become public enemy number one in the city of brotherly love. And with that said, the same thing can be said about Ben Simmons. I mean, Ben Simmons got upset after the criticism that was levied in his direction by both his head coach Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid after Philly lost to Atlanta in the conference semis last year, and he couldn't take it. But you know what? The criticism was warranted. I mean, let's be realistic. If you're Simmons and you're 6'11" and you have a guy 6'2" guarding you in the post, you got to go out there and take care of your business. And for Doc Rivers, and this is something that people, in my opinion, haven't talked about enough, but for Doc Rivers to say what he said publicly after that game, I know it was frustration involved in there. And for Joel Embiid to also say what he said following that game publicly, I guarantee you those conversations were had with Ben Simmons on multiple occasions behind closed doors. Listen, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And he didn't come through. And the bottom line is that's just frustration boiling over. So now Ben Simmons has to go. He's going to be the third guy in the pecking order in Brooklyn with behind Kyrie and Kevin Durant. Not exactly in that exact order, of course. But when KD comes back, it's still KD show, and then Kyrie and Ben Simmons. Now, one thing I will say about this trade for the Brooklyn Nets is okay, you went from having three alphas and Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. All three of those guys need the ball in their hands. Ben Simmons gives you another ball handler. He is also a very good rebounder, and he's also a solid defender. So those are things that James Harden didn't bring to the table as consistently. And I will say this: I think at least at first, for the rest of this season, uh, that the Nets are going to get the best of Ben Simmons. And the reason why I say that, he's going to play with a grudge on his shoulder, I believe, because he wants to prove Philly wrong. But at the end of the day, it's a similar situation in New York City. You're going to be judged by what you do in the postseason, and you could put up all of the gaudy regular season stats, win all the games you want to do, have all the individual accolades that you want. But in that city, you got to come through and you have to bring it. So both of these star players wanted their way out of the respective cities and teams that they were playing on. So now it's one of those, put up or shut up scenarios for both James Harden and both Ben Simmons. Now, for me with this trade, I don't think that either the Nets or Sixers are any closer to to winning a championship than they were before this deal got done. I just don't see it. The Sixers, they gave up some depth to obviously get James Harden. They're not as deep as they were last year, and they weren't as deep as they were last year coming into this season. On the flip side, for the Brooklyn Nets, I mean, we don't know about the health of Kevin Durant, and the fortunes of the Nets are going to rely on the health and availability of one Kevin Durant. I have never been a fan of Steve Nash coaching this team. I don't think he is a coach for this team. I think that what the Nets should have done before putting Kyrie and KD together, and then of course adding James Harden, they needed themselves a more established coach. And I just don't see Steve Nash being that guy to get the message across to Ben Simmons. I could be wrong, but I just simply don't see it. On the flip side, is James Harden going to buy into what Doc Rivers is selling as well? So we got to wait and see how those things play out. But nonetheless, this is a trade that's going to make headlines because of the people, the headliners that were involved. But I guarantee you, come springtime, not a lot is going to change. The Nets right now, they have really declined very rapidly in the standings. As things go right now, they're in the play-in tournament. I do expect things to turn around for them at some point. On the flip side, for the Sixers, they're expected to be a playoff team as well. And because of this trade and because of the eyes that are on this trade, a lot of people are going to be focused at what these two respective teams do come to playoff time, especially in the case of both James Harden and Ben Simmons. Both guys were unhappy. Both guys did what they had to do to get out of their respective teams. But again, at the end of the day, not really moved by this. I don't think a lot changes for either team. It's just the fact that two unhappy players are going to be wearing new jerseys in a couple of days. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.